WBT.
Huh? It's 5:04 and welcome into a Friday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Hopefully you're enjoying still some of your Christmas holiday season, and well, many folks are doing that, and that's going to cause busy airports across the nation today. Focusing on Charlotte Douglas this morning, it will be buzzing with activity during its peak holiday travel season. During the period, which runs from December the 20th through January 5th, airport officials estimate that more than 2.75 million people will depart from the airport. Yesterday and today, December 26th and 27th, are what they call peak days for airport travel as travelers leave their Christmas plans and start New Year's travel. The airport estimates that holiday travel this year is nearly 10% more than it was in 2023. That's good news. For context, the Thanksgiving travel season, which was relatively short, it was only just 4 weeks ago, very close to Christmas this year, set a record with 990,000 passengers departing the airport between November the 21st and December the 2nd. And obviously, we're looking at those peak travel days this year. Of course, we'll get a look at traffic in and around the airport coming up here in just a couple of minutes. So security wait times, parking reservations, all of that. Make sure you're on top of that if you are making your way in or out of Charlotte Douglas or really any of our airports statewide over the next couple of days as we wrap up the Christmas holiday season and trend our way into the new year 2025 here in just a couple of days. Turning our attention to some statewide news this morning, outgoing Governor Roy Cooper, current Attorney General, and Governor-elect Josh Stein are challenging North Carolina's legislative leaders and their latest plan for shifting control of appointments to the State Board of Elections. Cooper and Stein filed court documents Monday to fight provisions of Senate Bill 382. It's the second time that Cooper and Stein, both Democrats, have gone to court to oppose a section of SB 382, which was endorsed and overridden by the North Carolina Republican-led General Assembly back last month. A lawsuit filed on December the 12th targets a plan to shift control over appointments of the State Highway Patrol Commander. Now Cooper and Stein seek to amend a 2023 lawsuit opposing a law to restructure both the state and local Board of Elections. The case currently sits in the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Legislative leaders filed paperwork on Friday to end their appeal of a March ruling, which did favor Democrat Governor Roy Cooper. Why did legislative leaders do that? Well, because Senate Bill 382 changed the targeted law. And rather than replacing the existing 5-member state board of elections with an 8-member board and shifting board appointments to the legislature, the new arrangement would move oversight from the existing board and its current 5 appointees to incoming state auditor Republican Dave Bollick. Governor Roy Cooper saying in a news release, a press release with this legal action, quote, "We have had the same structure for our state board of elections for nearly a century, and it has served North Carolina well, with fair and secure elections across our state through every cycle." He continued by saying these blatantly partisan efforts to control elections, to give control over election boards to the newly elected Republicans will create distrust in our election process and serve no legitimate purpose. End quote there from Governor Roy Cooper. Josh Stein, also in the same news release, said, quote, "In recent years, these legislative leaders have repeatedly tried and failed to seize control of the State Board of Elections for their own partisan gains. This latest move insults the voters who rejected their power grab, violates our Constitution, and must not stand." As I'm sure you can take away, Cooper and Stein not in favor of this new law. The proposed supplemental complaint in the existing Cooper v. Berger election case spells out more details. The lawyers for Cooper and Stein wrote, quote, "In December of 2024, while legislative defendants appeal of their trial court loss in this case was pending, legislative defendants tried for a sixth time in 8 years to wrest executive authority over the State Board of Elections away from the governor. This time they are trying to change a structure of gubernatorial authority that has existed for nearly 100 years by transferring the power to appoint every member of the State Board of Elections to the newly elected state auditor of North Carolina, a Republican. They have done so not because the state auditor has any expertise or knowledge of election law or election administration. They continued, the attorneys continued by saying, indeed, the state auditor has never had any role in North Carolina elections. It appears that North Carolina is the only state that commits election administration to the state auditor, according to Cooper and Stein's complaint. They say that the state auditor's only qualifications for this newly assigned role is obvious. He is a Republican with a demonstration who is demonstrating that he is loyal to the legislative defendants. They claim that this blatant partisan restructuring of the state board is once again unconstitutional, saying, quote, it will undermine confidence in elections and it goes against the democratic principles on which our state government rests. It cannot stand. The State Court of Appeals was slated to hear arguments in the 2023 Cooper v. Berger Election Board case before lawmakers filed a motion to drop their appeal. A unanimous three-judge Superior Court panel ruled in Cooper's favor back in March of this year. All five living former North Carolina governors filed briefs in October supporting Cooper. Now lawmakers argue that the case no longer needs to proceed at the state's second highest court because of Senate Bill 382, which was approved on December the 11th over Governor Roy Cooper's veto. And it does shift authority from the election boards to incoming Republican Dave Bolick, who won the state auditor's job in the November election. Senate Bill 382 repealed the portion of the 2023 state law that prompted the original Cooper v. Berger lawsuit. The repeal, according to legislative leaders in their filing on Friday to drop their appeal, says it, quote, moots further review of the litigation concerning the session law's constitutionality. Based on the mootness, defendants seeks leave to withdraw their appeal or otherwise have it dismissed. This is going to be a big legal challenge that we continue to track. And again, you're talking about taking the North Carolina State Board of Elections and all 100 county board of elections. For folks that aren't super familiar with the process, not only does the governor make appointments to the overall State Board of Elections, but the governor also chooses the leader of all local county board of elections, meaning that in the past, the governor, depending on their political party, whether they are a Democrat or a Republican, has had complete control over the Board of Elections, again, not only at the state level, but at the local level as well, and changing and restructuring that power to Republican Dave Bolick would give Republicans control of, again, not only the State Board of Elections, but all 100 local county board of elections. This legal challenge will likely play out over the next couple of weeks and months. It is one of our top stories that we are tracking this morning over at CarolinaJournal.com, where it's now 5:13, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I've heard it's Friday. We'll get a look at traffic this morning with the Boomer Von Cannon.
That it is, Nick. You got it.
In political discussion after discussion, with the It's now 5:20. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT, streaming live this morning on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. You can also take the show with you on demand by checking out our podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap that subscribe or follow button, and take the show with you on demand on your own time. You can also listen online by visiting WBT.com and hovering over the podcast tab. Well, as we round out the Christmas holiday, 2 North Carolina towns made Southern Living's magazine 18 cutest Christmas towns in the South. Oh, hard-hitting news for you this morning. Hendersonville and Cary were among the holiday havens that go all out for the season, breaking out the festive best with thousands upon thousands of twinkling lights, impressive window displays, and garland galore, according to the magazine. Hendersonville, which was hit incredibly hard by Hurricane Helene in late September, came in at number 12 on the list. That in itself impressive with the devastation out in western North Carolina. The town carried on with its Christmas tradition, which included its annual Christmas tree lighting, which took place on November the 29th at their historic courthouse. They also hosted an old-fashioned Christmas with an open house of local businesses and farmers markets selling a variety of holiday items, which is, of course, incredibly important for many of those small businesses still reeling from the impacts of Hurricane Helene. In addition to that, the town held its annual Christmas parade along Main Street with plenty of floats, bands, and fire trucks. So things very much chugging along there in Hendersonville, getting back to some semblance of normalcy after the devastation from the hurricane. Cary was right behind Hendersonville at number 13. They had many events this year, including the lighting of a 40-foot Christmas tree, a gingerbread house competition, and its 43rd annual Christmas parade. Cary is a small township, a relatively small township outside of the Raleigh area in Wake County. They also hosted a Victorian Christmas at the Page Walker Art and History Center, where guests showed up to that. And the town also held its 13th annual Gifting Tree Project along South Academy Street and inside the downtown Cary Park with Christmas tree displays, with local families, schools, and organizations decorating their trees in the competition to win a donation to a nonprofit group of their choice. So here in North Carolina, the Christmas spirit alive and well. We talked about this a couple of times before Christmas, but not only do you have these 2 towns being in Southern Living magazine's list of Christmas towns in the South, but you also have North Carolina, one of the largest Christmas tree producers in the nation, with nearly 1 in 5 Christmas trees coming from the state, most of that sectioned out in western North Carolina. So congratulations to Hendersonville and Cary. They were topping that list, 2 of those towns here across the state of North Carolina. It's now 5:23, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Years now after COVID-19, bars and restaurants across the state of North Carolina were in fact shut down. Some of them have gone forward with their insurance companies to try and regain some of the losses in regards to that. And we've got some decisions from the North Carolina Supreme Court in regards to that story this morning. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Mitch, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but we're talking about things at this point that happened over 4 years ago in regards to some of these shutdowns. What is the latest that we're tracking this morning out of the Supreme Court?
You're exactly right that this is something that's been dragging on now for 4 years plus. You might remember that back in the fall, the state Supreme Court held over the course of 2 days hearings in 8 different lawsuits that dealt with various aspects of COVID-19 and shutdowns. And in this past round of rulings from the state Supreme Court, we got decisions on a handful of those cases. Probably one of the most interesting ones was a group of more than a dozen bars and restaurants across the state that had sued their insurance company. And this was one particular insurance company that didn't want to pay off any damage claims related to shutdowns from COVID-19. And basically the restaurants and bars had argued, wait a minute, our policy called for physical losses from damage to be covered by your insurance policy, and our shutdowns from COVID-19 fall exactly into this category. The insurance company had said, no, this type of incident, pandemic in which government is shutting things down, does not count. And the state Supreme Court basically said, No, the companies, the bars and restaurants should win this. Their damages are covered in this insurance, and so the insurance company is going to have to pay up, which is a very interesting finding and one that could be interesting for any future health emergencies going forward. Now, contrast that with a different case that came out the same day. And in fact, the unanimous Supreme Court opinion in these two considered the second case to be a companion case. And this is dealing with the fashion retailer Cato that people have probably seen at some point in a strip mall somewhere. Cato also sued its insurance company, different insurance company, over similar issues, damages related to COVID shutdowns. And in this case, the company loses, and that was because the insurance company policy had a particular provision in it that ruled out any damages linked to some type of bacterial infection. And so because there was an exception in that policy, Cato cannot compel its insurance company to pay for damages, but the bars and restaurants that didn't have that type of exception can. Now, Nick, it'll be very interesting to see what happens as the rest of these cases come out. Probably two of them that will be most interesting to people are whether a separate group of private bars, actually two separate groups of private bars in two separate suits, will be able to move forward with lawsuits against state government because of the shutdown. In both cases, in both cases, we're talking about bars that sued because Governor Cooper forced them to close and then kept them closed as other businesses reopen. And they're saying, look, you forced us to stay closed. You got to pay us for the losses. You stopped us from earning a living. The state Supreme Court has not yet ruled, but the state Supreme Court has heard those cases and will rule at some point in the months ahead.
Well, I'm glad you bring that case up specifically. One of the worst portions of that, Mitch, and I say ironic now, 4 years after the fact, was that these bars, specifically bars, not restaurants, but bars that were shut down, could not operate, Mitch, yet they were still required to pay their ABC license fees and do all of these other things in regards to state government. Meanwhile, the restaurants that served alcohol were open and operational, yet just standalone bars were closed. And as you noted, that's not going after their insurance companies. That's actually going after the state government. So that would mean that potentially taxpayers have to be on the hook and pay some sort of restitution here?
Yeah, certainly that could be the outcome because it was the state government that shut them down. And the suits are based on this idea that you can't violate a North Carolinian's fundamental rights, including the right to earn a living, unless you have some justification that says that this is the reason that we can do this. Now, the argument from the bars has been along the lines of what you just talked about, the fact that we remember that almost every business closed down shortly after COVID. In the immediate aftermath of the virus, people thought, okay, well, we don't know what should be open, what should be closed. But state government allowed a lot of businesses to reopen relatively quickly, including restaurants that had bars, and the bars within the restaurants were allowed to reopen. Private bars could not, though, and they remained closed much longer. So the plaintiffs in these lawsuits are saying, wait a minute, you can't come up with a legitimate government justification of why you allowed a bar in a restaurant or a bar in a winery or a bar in a distillery to reopen and not allow our bars to reopen. The explanation that the plaintiffs in this case or in these two cases put forward was, hey, you decided to reopen these other businesses because of the economic impact. You factored something into this other than public health and safety. And so if it wasn't a public health and safety decision, there was no good reason for you to keep us closed. And so now the state is going to have to pay for all of that lost business that we had because you didn't have a legitimate justification for shutting us down and keeping us closed.
A great update this morning, Mitch. We'll keep an eye on those other cases as well. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us this morning on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:29, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
All right, thank you, Nick.
It's 5:36. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. Welcome back to the program this morning. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Here's some pretty exciting news this morning. North Carolina's Research Triangle Park is set to host the FISU World University Games in their summer edition in 2029. North Carolina was originally set to host the nation for the 2027 games. However, those will be taking place in South Korea in 2027, and North Carolina is bumped back to 2029. According to a press release, it says the award of the 2029 FSU World University Games to our state and country is the culmination of an extensive 5-year effort by more than 1,000 individuals, 13 universities, and 5 cities, 5 counties, and the state of North Carolina, alongside 53 corporate organizations to sponsor land for this amazing event. The FISU World University Games is second in size to only the Olympic Games. Listen to that. And is the largest event for student athletes on the planet. And it is on the scale of the Global Olympic Multi-Sport Competition. The only other time that the United States has hosted the Summer Games was all the way back in 1993. That took place in Buffalo at the time. Continuing with the press release, North Carolina landing these games is similar to a major corporate relocation, as the FISU game will deliver major economic impact of over $150 million, but will also have the added benefit of significant international tourism and worldwide branding exposure for our state and local communities. We thank FISU for selecting North Carolina as the official host of the 2029 World University Games, and we look forward to partnering with the FISU family to deliver a most successful games in 2029. A special reserve fund was created by the state legislature in 2023 to allocate funding for the event, and so far the North Carolina Department of Commerce has allocated about $25 million to go towards these games. In January of 2023, executive committees from FISU announced that North Carolina was the pick to host those games. The announcement came just before the 2023 games in the Lake Placid region, the first time in 51 years that the United States had hosted this major competition. Again, only second in size to the Olympics. Lake Placid was previously the host of the FISU Winter Games back in 1972. Of course, the Lake Placid Olympic site as well. The process for hosting the FISU World Championship game will begin with a call for host candidates. That will take place over the next couple of years. This is a major win for North Carolina, a huge honor for the state, and it's something that there will be a lot of preparation, a lot of work going into. We'll track that over the next couple of years, as that those summer edition games will take place outside of the Research Triangle Park area up in Raleigh, or the RTP area, in the summer of 2029. It's 5:40. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. With the 2024 general election about a month or so behind us, things are already ratcheting up for the midterm elections all the way in 2026. And there's going to be a very contentious race here in North Carolina. U.S. Senator Thom Tillis is up for re-election. To get some details on a new poll by a group called Victory Insights, Donna King, the editor-in-chief over at CarolinaJournal.com, joins us this morning on the News Hour. Donna, this is a very interesting poll. It seems like we're just finally recovering from the general election this year, yet we're already got our eyes set on the midterms in 2026. And Thom Tillis is going to be a major part of that conversation, not just here in North Carolina, but likely across the country.
Oh, huge part of that conversation. You know, this really started even before November 6th. Thom Tillis's race was, I think, historically expensive the last go-round. And then I would anticipate we're going to keep hitting new records on the cost of Senate races every 2 years or every 6 years now from now on. So this new Victory Insights poll is looking at who North Carolina's senator could be starting in the 2026 race. In this, it shows Laura Trump would get 65% support in a primary against Tillis, who would get 11%. Now, in that, 24% of respondents in their poll said they are still undecided, but it really shows that a potential candidacy of Laura Trump, who is married to Eric Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, could actually bring a lot of attention to this race, even without Tillis.
Laura, also a North Carolina, grew up in North Carolina. She grew up in Wrightsville Beach, just outside of the Wilmington area. She's currently co-chair of the RNC with former NC GOP chair Michael Whatley. A lot of North Carolina connections in regards to this. Is some of this, Donna, predicated, however, on how Tillis handles himself over the next 2 years with the Trump administration and how conservative he is in regards to Trump's agenda?
Absolutely. I think that's going to be huge because there is a big chunk of North Carolina's Republican base that believes that Tillis is not conservative enough on some key issues, that he's not been pro-Trump enough in their view. So he's got something to really prove, I think, to that base of Republican voters, that he is on, Team Trump, or that he is willing to work with the White House and do it in an effective way. Tillis has always been, worked in the leadership offices there when Tillis was Speaker of the House, and he does work across the aisle effectively, but he also led his caucus really effectively. He ushered in that that new Republican era of state policy. So he is a formidable opponent, but right now Republicans, that base, is not happy with him. So Laura Trump coming in and potentially primarying him with those kind of poll results 2 years out, that could really be interesting. But this poll also looked at how she might do against a potential Cooper nominee on the Democrat side. And in that, Cooper has about a 1.5% edge over Laura Trump in that race. So could she easily win the primary, but she may not be able to win the general if Cooper is her opponent.
Well, and I think that's an important distinction to note. I mean, we saw that with the governor's race back a couple of weeks ago. You had Mark Robinson, who came firing out of both barrels out of the primary, huge support amongst Republican voters. Yet, Donna, he loses the general election by 15%, 800,000 votes. It's the worst spread for a governor's loss in 44 years across the state of North Carolina. There's a huge difference between the both Republican and Democrat primary and, of course, the general election.
It really is. Now, I will also say that his campaign was weighted down by things that would not be really impacting Laura Trump. So that was a spectacular fashion loss in that way. But it's important to note that Roy Cooper is popular in North Carolina. He has always polled highly, even when Republicans are very angry about some of his policy, even when he takes a far left or progressive stance on things, fights with the Republican-led legislature, vetoes budget after budget after budget that has teacher raises in it, still remains pretty much above water in popularity and favorability. So would that translate then into a Senate race? It could. But it is important, Laura Trump would be very popular here, I think, particularly when we're looking at that key demographic, that, suburban woman who is looking, for just a change of fresh blood, new voice on Capitol Hill. And she would probably appeal to that voter. And it's a critical demographic.
No question about it being a critical demographic. When do you expect that this race would actually start taking place as we get ready to turn the calendar over to 2025? Obviously, the national news on Trump is going to suck a lot of air out of really anything that goes on in any other state. That's going to be the main focus and what people are going to be focusing on. When do you think we'd start seeing a race like this start, little eggshells here and there that people start dropping on us? When do you think that would really begin?
Well, I mean, she's not a North Carolina resident right now. She's a resident of Florida, so that would have to change first. So I believe she would, of course, to run in the primary, she has to be affiliated with the party in the state. She has to be there for 90 days. You can't register with that party until you're a resident. So there's a few gates that she'd have to hit. Since she'd have to file for a candidacy in, say, December, she would really have to start living in North Carolina and move back here by September of 2025. So we're talking about not even a year right now. If we see her, buying a beach house, down in Wrightsville or Wilmington, and really making a residency here starting in September of 2025, I think it's off to the races.
And now on the Democrat side, obviously, Governor Roy Cooper is the name that's been tossed around. Irregardless of what listeners this morning think about Roy Cooper, Donna, he is an incredibly popular candidate. If he wasn't term limited out, he would likely continue to be the governor probably as long as he wanted to be. And is it one of these situations where he's probably the main contender for the Democrat aisle, or are there other individuals that'll try and make a serious play in the primary against him?
Sure. I mean, I would anticipate that there will be several potential candidates. There was some talk that had Kamala Harris won, he would be, number one in the queue for potentially AG, Attorney General, that kind of thing. So I'm not really sure. He seems to be somebody who likes the executive role. And so an agency head, or it would have been probably the cleanest fit for him. In this case, the Senate, I think that he is just really has been a leader of the Democratic Party in North Carolina from a fundraising standpoint. So he seems like the natural choice.
You can read more on this story by visiting our website, carolinajournal.com. Where it's now 547, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. A final look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. emergency situation station.
Hot. It's 5:51. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. I encourage you to check out our podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour. You'll see a subscribe or follow button. Tap that, and you'll get a new show delivered to your smartphone or tablet each and every weekday morning shortly after we're off the air. You can also listen online by visiting carolinajournal.com and tapping on the Listen tab. We are tracking some statewide news this morning in regards to a piece of legislation we spent a lot of time on over the last couple of months, Senate Bill 382. We are learning this morning that outgoing Governor Roy Cooper and Governor-elect Josh Stein are challenging the North Carolina's legislative leaders and their latest plan for shifting control of appointments to both state and local board of elections. Cooper and Stein filed court documents earlier this week to fight provisions of SB 382. It's the second time that Cooper and Stein, both Democrats, have gone to court to oppose different sections of that legislation, which was enacted by the General Assembly back, originally passed in late November. It was a veto overridden back here just a couple of weeks ago. A lawsuit filed on December the 12th targets a plan to shift control over appointments to the state highway patrol commander out of the governor's position as well. Now Cooper and Stein seek to amend Cooper's 2023 lawsuit opposing a law to restructure state and local election boards. That case currently sits well within the hands of the North Carolina Court of Appeals, and legislative leaders filed paperwork last Friday to end their appeal of a March ruling that did favor Democrat Governor Roy Cooper. That's because Senate Bill 382 changed the targeted law. Rather than replacing the existing 5-member state board of elections with an 8-member board and shifting those appointments from the governor to the legislature, the new arrangement under SB 382 would move oversight and the existing board to, as well as its appointments, to incoming state auditor Dave Bullock, who is a Republican. In a press release, Governor Roy Cooper said, "We have had the same structure for our state board of elections for nearly a century, and it has served North Carolina well with fair and secure elections across our state through every cycle. These blatant partisan efforts to give control over the election boards to a newly elected Republican will create distrust in our election process and serve no legitimate purpose." End quote from Governor Roy Cooper. Incoming Governor Josh Stein, also a Democrat, said, quote, "In recent years, these legislative leaders have repeatedly tried and failed to seize control of the State Board of Elections for their own partisan games." Stein said the latest move insults the voters who rejected their power grab. It also violates our Constitution and must not stand. Ending the quote there from the current Attorney General. The proposed supplemental complaint in the existing Cooper v. Berger election case spells out some more details. Attorneys for Cooper and Stein wrote, "In December of 2024, while legislative defendants' appeal of their trial court loss to this case was pending, legislative defendants tried for a 6th time in 8 years to wrest executive authority over the State Board of Elections away from the governor. This time they're trying to change a structure of gubernatorial authority that has existed for nearly 100 years by transferring the power to appoint every member of the State Board of Elections to the newly elected state auditor of North Carolina, a Republican. They have done so not because the state auditor has any expertise or knowledge of election law or election administration. The court filing says, indeed, the state auditor has never had any role in North Carolina elections. It appears that North Carolina is the only state that commits election administration to the state auditor's office. The state auditor's only qualification for this newly assigned role is obvious. He's a Republican with who has demonstrated pressure there to legislative defendants. They claim that this blatantly partisan restructuring of the state board is once again unconstitutional. It will undermine confidence in the elections, and it it circumvents the democratic principles on which our government rests. It cannot stand, according to the current governor and governor-elect. The State Court of Appeals was slated to hear arguments in this case, Cooper v. Berger, but obviously that is not happening as they have asked the unanimous three-judge Superior Court panel to go ahead and drop their appeal. Now lawmakers argue that the case is no longer needed and it doesn't need to proceed at the state's highest court due to the veto override of Senate Bill 382. That legislation also repeals portions of the 2023 state law that prompted the original lawsuit. The repeal, according to legislative leaders, moots further review of the litigation concerning the session law's constitutionality. According to a motion that those legislative leaders filed on Friday, they say based on that, defendants seek leave to withdraw their appeal or otherwise have it dismissed. This is going to be a very fiery legal challenge over the next couple of weeks and months. We'll be tracking it, of course, right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. That's going to do it for a Friday edition. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We are back with you with the latest statewide and local news coming up Monday morning, 5 to 6 a.m. right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.
WBTA.
You are clear, brother.